The year was 1998. Although I was still very hooked on arcades, it was during this time that a friend of mine got something special for his birthday. He told me that instead of going to the malls to play video games, he can now do it in the comfort of his own house. As a child, naturally, I was confused by his words. Did his parents buy him those arcade machines? If so, it must have been a pain to get them into his house since they were so massive and heavy. He laughed when I asked him that. He said that they did buy him a video game machine, but it wasn't something my little child brain had thought of. I went to his house and saw this machine. The moment my eyes made contact with it, I was instantly mesmerized. There, in his room, was a PlayStation. I couldn't believe that he could play games on such a tiny machine. I bombarded him with questions about it, and he kindly gave me the answers I wanted. Naturally, I wanted one for myself. I begged my parents to buy me one, but during that time, money was tight and the PlayStation wasn't exactly cheap. Aside from that, my grades were also in the red, so they thought that if they bought me one, my grades would drop even more. I couldn't do anything about it since my parents' decision was final. Feeling defeated, all I could do was continue playing in the arcades, which wasn't that bad, if I think about it. I was still enjoying my childhood as best as I could, but that all changed a year later. To my surprise, during my 10th birthday, my parents got me a video game console. It was so unexpected since my grades were average, and aside from my birthday, they had no real reason to give me such a gift. Maybe they thought I was old enough to balance my studies and gaming session. Well, whatever the reason, I finally had my very own PlayStation. This is not a PlayStation. It wasn't even close. So the thing is, instead of a PlayStation, my parents got me a freaking Sega Genesis. Because parents are parents, they thought that this was just as good as this. Which is not. I didn't even know what a Sega Genesis was, since it was my first time seeing one. Even though I was very confused, I got over it within minutes. Who cares if it's not a PlayStation? As long as I can play games on it, it didn't really matter to me. It wasn't long until my little gaming session began. Of course, my parents were still strict about it, but I promised that I'd keep my grades up and not fail during my exams. And because my first exposure to console games was a Sega Genesis, it was only natural that I fell in love with Sega's mascot. Of course, I'm talking about none other than Sonic himself. His games were so fast-paced that I could hardly keep up. Although I had fun, I'll admit that the difficulty of Sonic games was too much for a little kid at that time. Heck, even today, I still struggle to beat any of the games. Aside from Sonic, I also had a few other games as well. If my memory is correct, my other games were Earthworm Jim, Disney's Aladdin, a Batman game, a Tetris game, and Golden Axe. There might have been more, but I can't remember more than that. Looking back now, I enjoyed playing the Sega Genesis. Even though the games for the PlayStation was better, I still had hours and hours of fun. As a kid, it didn't matter as long as I had my own gaming console. Plus, I wasn't that spoiled, so even though I was disappointed at first, I later appreciated what my parents did for me. For the next couple of years, that Sega Genesis kept me from getting bored whenever I had nothing to do. On one occasion, I even got a Game Boy. I can't remember how exactly I got such an amazing gift, but whatever. My childhood wasn't perfect, but I was enjoying it. I had a Sega Genesis and a Game Boy. Everything was going smoothly. But little did my naive self knew that something was coming. Something that would change my perspective about video games for the rest of my life. The dawn of the internet cafes had arrived, and with it came PC games.